Hi, my name is Richard Sanchez, and I want to welcome you to this special Master the Workflow class. I wanted to put together this class because I haven't seen one put together that really breaks down what an ALE is. I don't know if you use ALEs in your normal workflow, but I do all the time. They save me a world of time. I imagine if you work in scripted television or in features that you get an ALE delivered with your dailies and you use it to double check metadata, and if anything isn't there, you merge it back into your dailies, and you probably don't think much about it after that. Well, I use ALEs for a lot of different things, and it took me a while to really wrap my head around what I could do with them, but once I did, there's a lot of time that can be saved using them, so I figured I would jump straight in, and we'll get started here. I'm going to start by just kicking out an ALE of this bin of dailies, and I'm going to kick this out to the desktop. So let's talk about what an ALE is. If you look at this, and I'm using the program Text Wrangler here. All an ALE is a text file. Very simple text file with three sections: the header, column, and data. And I want to pull this alongside the bin just so that things make sense a little bit more. I'm going to close that. So this information is based on my Avid project. I'm working in a 1080 project. I clicked the film tab. I set it to 35mm 4perf. Audio format is 48K, frames per second 23976. Then we have the column section. The column directly correlates to the columns of the bin that you have open. So color, right here, name, source file, nothing there, tracks, start time code 13475209, 13475209, end 13475305, 13475305, and tape name. So you can see there's a direct correlation to everything, and this is dependent on the bin view that you use. So you can create different bin views for different ALE export purposes as you see fit. But that's all an ALE is. It's a text file. Now, by default, your text editing programs will probably not open an ALE. You simply set that in your operating system to open them up with a text editor, and you'll be in good shape. Now, there are a couple of caveats to working with ALEs, and they're really important. The first is an ALE is plain text, not rich text, which is why you probably don't want to use text edit in a Mac. That's why I prefer using Text Wrangler. Your text encoding must be UTF-8. You can see down here in Text Wrangler, it will preserve that formatting. And the last thing about working with an ALE is you have to have a carriage return at the end. If we go all the way down here, you can see line 73, and then there's one more line. If there is not a carriage return at the end of this final line of data will not merge. So we've touched upon what an ALE is. Why don't we talk about what you can do with an ALE? So I do, in general, 5 different things with an ALE, and I'm going to show you some of those right now. Now, there are 2 major concepts that I will not be going that deep into, but I'll be using them for this demonstration. The first is FileMaker. I'll be using my own FileMaker database, which I use for my Codebook and for my visual effects database, just to show you as an example some things that I can use, how I can create ALEs in separate programs and still save a lot of time in the Avid. The other concept is regular expressions. Regular expressions are a rabbit hole indeed, but they're a very handy way to modify text. And if you're interested in learning more about regular expressions, I recommend taking the Linda course by Kevin Skoglund. It was an excellent class. I had to sit through it about 2 or 3 times before I really wrapped my head around it, but there is amazing time to be saved by using regular expressions. So let's get started. The first, most obvious thing that I use ALEs for is you can take your delivered dailies that you get with all your ISOs in them and quickly create clips with only your mix track, which is the way most scripted editors want to work. They don't typically want 7 or 8 channels of sound, just the mix track, and then when you turn it over, you'll be handing that over to your sound department. They'll reconstitute all your ISOs. A typical way of doing this is you can open the clip up, you can select just the picture track and the first sound track, and you can subclip them, and there we go, we have that. Now, if you get, say, 100 clips of dailies, that could take you an awful lot of time. Here's how you can use an ALE to your advantage. I'm going to do this one more time. I already kicked out this ALE, but just to take you through the full process, I'm just going to export, and I've mapped this to Shift-H, but you can do it by going to File. And it is important, if you want to kick out an ALE of a bin, you can't have a clip selected, because as soon as you do that and you go to Output, Export to File, it's going to give you all of your settings for QuickTimes or graphics, whatever you have. But if you deselect all clips in a bin and then go to Output, you can export that bin, and it's going to default to giving you two options: Avid Log Exchange or Tab Delimited. So I'm going to kick out an Avid Log Exchange, and we're overwriting the file that was there anyway, and I'm going to open this in Text Wrangler, and I'm going to type a very simple expression. So this expression, I'm just going to explain what this expression does so you understand what I'm doing here. This here is called a look behind assertion, and what this does is it's going to look behind what I'm trying to replace. So it's going to go through all of these lines, and once it sees VA1, it's going to address anything that is ahead of it. And let me fix that. I actually typed the wrong letter here. So in the parlance of an ALE, VA1, only if you have the tracks column visible. V stands for your picture track, video. A1 is audio track 1. This is going to find V and A1, and then anytime after that, it's going to look for the letter A and any number. And the plus means it's repeatable. So this could happen one time, this could happen 20 times. If you have 20 tracks of sound, why you'd have that, I don't know. But it will only look for this, which means by the time it hits this tab over here, nothing's going to happen, and that'll be the end of it. So if I do this real quick, look at that. Like magic, all you see is VA1. The text replaced is going to get rid of any track that is not there. Now the advantage of doing it this way is, just as an example, you can see I've just selected 62 clips. So I'm going to modify 62 clips at once. That's much faster than double clicking these and selecting just the first track and subclipping them. It's also not going to add .sub when I do this, so a lot of time to be saved doing this. Now, it's also worth noting, if any of you are familiar with Evan Schiff and his Shifty tools, he has a tool that will modify ALEs for you online. It's an awesome tool. This is exactly the same thing as that. I just always thought it was handy to know how to do it manually. So this is our ALE. I'm going to save it. And now that it's there, we need to make sure our shot log settings are set correctly. So I'm going to go to Import, I'm going to go to Shot Log, I'm going to go to Merge Events with Known Sources and automatically create subclips. Click on that, hit OK. Now you have to select all of your clips before you do this, that's important. And now I'm just going to drag this ALE in, and look at that. You can see FS1. If I click on the master clip, it's showing me 2 tracks of sound. If I click on this subclip that it automatically created, just 1. If I go to 9A, take 1, 4 tracks of sound, 9A the subclip. I've just created my dailies. Everything's been subclipped out. Doesn't matter if you get 10 clips or 200 clips. You just did that in a matter of seconds. Tons of time to be saved. I'm going to just grab these, put them in that bin for now. That's a very handy way of saving a lot of time using ALEs. I'm going to show you another cool thing you can do with ALEs. For those of you who work in features, the concept of kicking out a codebook is not foreign, but if you've only ever worked in television, if you've never worked in feature, you might not know what a codebook is. Basically, a codebook is a database of your clips and the metadata associated with them. In the film days, it was a way of keeping track of the negative. So what cam rolls, what lab rolls associate back to the negative. Nowadays, it refers just to your clips themselves. It typically tracks things like CDLs. It's a database of your clips. Now, in this case, I'm going to export a tab delimited because for the sake of populating a codebook, that's just easier. So I'm going to go to my codebook. Alrighty, and let's import this. So you can see I've populated my first day of dailies, my codebook. Now, in the case of a codebook that you're going to turn into the studio at the end, oftentimes people will put in a reference still. It's just another way to really easily identify all of your clips from your codebook. Of course, you can enter description and comments, but I'd like to have a reference still. Now, if you're going to export a representative frame of every clip in your project, that could take you a lot of time. So some tricks you can do with ALEs. I'm going to take advantage of my database here, and I'm using a plugin that's going to calculate the difference between the timecode in, the timecode out, and it's going to give me an in point at the 50% mark of all of these clips so that I can quickly kick out a JPEG from the center of the clip. Now, this is one of those tools that this is going to get you a representative frame maybe 70% of the time, but that can still save you a lot of time in terms of having to go through every single clip, finding a representative frame, entering this into your codebook. There's a lot of time to be saved. I'll show you how I do that right now. I'm going to kick out a still mark-in ALE, and this ALE will add a mark at the 50% from in each clip. I'm going to say yes. In a nutshell, I've used FileMaker and a series of calculations to recreate an ALE, and here it is right here. And you can see it looks very similar to what you've seen. The difference is it's added a mark in. And we're going to go back here. And just to show you as we do this, I'm going to go to tracks. I'm going to show mark in. And there's some old mark-ins here that we're going to disregard. So let's get rid of those. Now, I showed you where I went to shot log settings before. Now we're going to go to a different kind of shot log setting. In this case, I'm going to go to import. I'm going to set shot log settings to merge events with known master clips. Now, it's important to note with merge is a way to add metadata from an ALE to the master clips in the Avid. And you can merge to master clips only. You cannot merge data to a subclip. But it's also worth noting, if you merge data to the master clip, the subclip will inherit that data. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to select all of my clips, and I'm going to drag this ALE in. And look at that, it just added a mark in. And if I go to these clips, you can see it's dead center of each frame. Again, just going down the line, you can see not all of them are perfect, but if you're working by yourself on the kind of project where you just need to populate this really quickly, this can get you in a very good place very quickly. And it's kind of a debate nowadays as to whether people do or don't keep codebooks. Some people I know don't keep codebooks at all anymore, but I still do. The reason being, it's a very handy bit of data to have. So I now have all of my clips, and I'm going to use a separate tool here. What I do is the still image, and I'm going to import everything. So now you can see what we have. We have a codebook with still images, fully filled out, 61 clips. We've saved a lot of time using ALEs. Now, let's talk about some other things you can do with ALEs. So, ALEs can save you a world of time for visual effects. I'm going to open up this sequence, and I've pre-prepared this. You can see I've marked several visual effects. We have visual effects numbers here, and I broke it out throughout the course of this short film just to show you how you can use this to speed up your workload very quickly across a multitude of clips. In this case, we have 50 visual effects. So I have pre-prepared this database with visual effects records. Very simple, reference image, source image, timecode in, timecode out, handle length, and using another trick, you can use this to create a pull list for your visual effects. And I'll show you how to do that now. Again, I'm using this database that I have pre-prepared, and I'm going to create an ALE. What this ALE is going to do, and I'll show you that ALE right now. You can see this ALE has taken 50 clips from my database, and you can see in my database here, we have the source name, slate down here, going all the way down. We can just identify what these are. So name, slate, start, mark in, VFX references. This allows me to track frame numbers. All of this information would normally have to be entered, but it's going to come directly out of my database. Because again, all this database is doing is propagating text. It's going to take that text, reformat it into an ALE, and bring it in. But the time that you would have spent subclipping each one of these elements and naming them what they want to be could be a lot of time. You can see under the name column, MTW 001 1010 BG1 version 1. This is named after the plate that I'm about to pull. It's background 1 for visual effects scene 1, shot number 1010. It's going to do this for 50 visual effects all at once. I'm about to get all of my pulls in a very short amount of time. Watch this. I do this all the time. I'll grab a copy of my reel with all the shots I'm about to pull. I'll just set bin display to show reference clips. And I'm going to sort everything here. I'm going to select all of my picture reference clips. And then I'm going to double check. Always double check that your shot log settings are set correctly before you do this. Shot log. I definitely do not want to merge. I want to merge events with known sources and automatically create subclips. Now, I'm going to drag this ALE in. And there we are, 50 pulls. And we can double check these right now. You can see there's endpoints marked already, leaving out the handles, leaving just the shot. And if I go to the first plate here, I can cut this over the top. And I'm just going to toggle beneath and below. So my shot here is subclipped. It's named appropriately, which means when I hand this over to the lab in an EDL, they're going to see what the clip name is. They're not going to see the slate and hand it to the vendor thinking it's something that it's not, or thinking that it's a name that would confuse them. This is going to be named after the plate I'm going to deliver to them. So I'm going to take that, and then I'm going to take all of these clips. I'm going to drag them into my bin. Here we go. And I'm going to select all clips. I'm going to hit T. Mark in to out to grab the whole clips. And then I'm going to create a sequence here. I'll call this today's date. VFX pull 001. Let's sort everything. And there we go. We are ready to pull 50 visual effects plates. That hardly took any time at all. Now, I'll admit that this was pre-prepared in that the database was already filled out, which takes time, but again, through automation, there's a lot of time you can save that way. And the advantage that I find working this way is since the ALE is coming out of my database, once everything is sourced from the same spot, all the names will correspond to each other, which is a good thing. It ultimately means the amount of data that I'm entering by hand is going to reduce the potential amount of errors that could happen because this came from the same place. If I numbered this wrong in my database, it's going to be numbered wrong in the plate ID. But the good thing about that is that way it's wrong in one place, but it's the same way across the board. So when you're talking to a vendor about a number, you can at least go, okay, I meant to number this 20, I actually numbered it 30. That's fine. The good news is you're talking about the same thing. So we have a pull list created very quickly, send an EDL to your lab, and you have your VFX pulls. Now I'm going to show you something pretty cool that you can do to save you time when you get your visual effects back in. Because most visual effects editors will tell you cutting shots in and checking them can be a pretty significant amount of time. I'm going to hit the 1 button and an in. That's going to mark an in point 8 frames in. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In fact, sometimes you have to go one more. And there we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to pretend that these are actually visual effects submissions and not plates. But here's where you can save some time using ALEs once again. I'm going to show reference clips. Great. Now, this bin here is simulating our visual effects incoming. I'm going to create a new bin just to show you what we can do. So, going back to the text data that we have at our disposal, if you look at the data that you're typically keeping track of in your visual effects database, you have your timecode in where the shot occurs, and you have over the course of how many frames. So what you can then do is, I'm using a plugin here, I'm using the TCFXM plugin to then calculate, I need a clip that starts at this timecode and goes for this many frames and tell me the timecode out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to export an ALE that I call dummy clips right here to desktop. Now I'm going to set my import setting to maintain events as logged. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the dummy clip ALE into here, and you can see what it did. It created a bunch of clips that are offline. So what this would be is when I get incoming visual effects from my vendor, I can search through my database and say, I've received which shots today. Okay, now I need to cut these all into the timeline. I need to find them where they are in the timeline and cut them in. And there are some pretty fast ways of cutting them in. You can use timeline search, which is a really handy feature. But what I'm going to do here can save you a lot of time. I'm going to select all clips. I'm going to go to clip auto sequence. And what this is going to do is it's essentially going to create a roadmap for me. So I'm going to go back to my sequence where I'm about to cut all of these visual effects into. I'm going to create a clip over the top. And anybody who's worked in reality certainly knows what the auto sequence does. It's going to lay the clips in timecode order. And so what I have is I'm going to cut this into my source. And you can see we're accurate because this corresponds exactly with all of these timecode numbers. Now, of course, these are offline, so this might not seem that useful to you, but if you have a reel that has hundreds of visual effects in it and you have 30, instead of henpecking exactly where they are trying to search, you have a roadmap ready to go. So I'm just going to jump in here, and again, we're pretending that this is our received visual effect. So I'm just going to select that, cut it over the top, and again, I'm going to just toggle between the two. And look at that, there's no movement between the two, which means if this is a delivered visual effect, that now matches. I'm going to go to this next one, cut this one in. I'm going to double click that. And you can see, even if it's off a little bit, you can nudge it back where it needs to be. Again, we're just double checking, toggle. I'm not going to do this whole thing, but the point of this is to show you we have a roadmap. And again, you always have to double check these by hand, but there's time to be saved because I'm not henpecking through my whole sequence. Just double checking, here we go. My plates against my delivered shots. Now the last thing you can do with ALEs, and this is a really cool thing. Now it's worth noting if you're using Media Composer 2020.4, there's a feature called bulk edit, which will basically nullify this, but we're not all using the newest versions. I'm certainly not. I'm doing this demonstration on 2018-12 because that's what I'm still using on my current show. But if you ever run into the situation, I'm going to simulate this scenario right here. I'm going to take a bunch of these dailies, and we all know how much we just love when this happens. I'm just going to do it with 50 of them just to show you how quickly you can do this. You have 50 clips, and they're all called copy, and I don't want that. That's not helping me, but now it's there, and it's 50 clips, and okay. Well, you're stuck with this. And if you ever transcode a clip and you get the .news, you don't want to deal with the .news. Well, one way that you can quickly get rid of this is you can export an ALE and export that there. And let's open that ALE. There it is. And I'm going to search .copy. .01, and you can see it's going to go down the line here. Find and replace all. Thank God it's gone, and look at that. There's actually copy 02. If you got to do a few manually, it's not that big a deal. But trying to do this in the Avid would have been a nightmare if you don't have bulk edit. So, settings. Let's set our import settings to shot log, merge events with known master clips, and select those. And let's find that ALE that we just modified, drag it back. Look at that, gone. You just renamed all of your clips in a fraction of the time that it would take. I'll show you one more thing you can do with this. I'm gonna go back to a very simple view. I'm gonna overwrite that old bin. If you ever run into a situation, maybe somebody gives you data from Excel or something, you need to merge custom data into your clips. Going back to this, an ALE is just tab delimited. So you have color, and then a tab, name, tab, source file, tab, tracks, tab, start, tab, end, tab, tape, and it's the end. Well, if I add a tab, and I'm gonna call this custom column. Now the one thing when you're adding a custom column in an ALE is you cannot use a space. If you do, it will not merge. Don't do it. If you have to have a space, put an underscore. Now, since I have a tab here, I'll just call this custom data. And maybe this one has different custom data. Custom data 2. That's just a space. You can't put a tab in here or it won't show up. Custom data 3. If only I could spell. And I'll just do these three just to show you what we're doing here. So let's again double check that my settings are set correctly. Merge events with known master clips, and I'm going to select that. Grab this, drag it in. Of course, it's going to be mad at me for several clips. So you can see the ALE got mad at me there. But what I did was I was able to add this custom column and this custom data showed up. Now sometimes in that case you can see it didn't pop up automatically, but if your custom column doesn't show up, you just go down here under this line, which is where all of the custom columns live in your bin display, and cust call, just like I asked for, and all of the data we entered is there. And so another example of you doing this is I can open this up, and for example, I'm going to show you what I'm about to do is I'm going to open Excel. Now, you're not going to save your ALE in Excel because Excel will mess up the formatting here. But what I will do is I'm going to use this just as a quick way to identify all of my custom columns. So, custom data 4. You know what? I'll just use this to add custom data to everything. And yeah, there we go. Custom data going all the way down. I don't even need to save this because all I'm going to do is I'm using this just to have the benefit of cells to see what I'm doing. I'm going to paste this back into Text Wrangler because this will preserve text encoding UTF-8, and you can see when I did that I lost my carriage return. Let's get that back. I'm going to save that, and let's get rid of here and get rid of there, and let's select all of our clips, double check, shot log, merge events with known master clips, okay, and drag this ALE in. Look at that. And this can be really handy, for example, if you have stock footage and a clips producer has a series of metadata that they want to go into these clips. You can merge everything all together and do it pretty quickly. And again, I show this to you because the ALE used to be a really intimidating thing to me, but once I wrapped my head around it, it was pretty simple, and there's a lot of time to be saved with it. And here's to you looking for ways that you can use ALEs to improve your workflow in ways that I haven't even thought of. There's just so much you can do with these, and I hope this benefits you and saves you some time.